Welcome to Church History Insights and Questions with your host, David Eaton. This is part 2 of a video series on Emma Hale Smith Bidamon, a very interesting character from church history. And when we look at her life, there are lots of sources, and these are some of the sources, by no means all of them, but these are some of the more well-known sources of information. So we've got biographies of Joseph Smith, but they also talk a lot about Emma Smith. So there's Ganesh Cherryon's quite a recent biography of Joseph Smith, the architect of Mormonism. George Q. Cannon, a long time ago, Life of Joseph Smith the Prophet. Lucy Mack Smith, The History of Joseph Smith by his mother. The very famous and well-known Joseph Smith Rough Stone Rolling by Richard Lyman Bushman. In the middle there you've got The Rise and Fall of an American Prophet, Joseph Smith, by John G. Turner. Interestingly, John Turner, not a member of the church, so brings a sort of non-member outlook to the history. At the top there, you've got Fawn Brodie, No Man Knows My History, The Life of Joseph Smith. Fawn Brodie was the niece of David O. McKay, a former prophet and president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Below that, you've got Charisma Under Pressure, Dan Vogel, and then American Zion, which is a much broader history by Benjamin Park, but it obviously includes Joseph Smith a great deal, and also Emma Smith. And then on the right, you've got more focused histories on Emma Hale Smith by Paul Thomas Smith there, and by Jennifer Reeder, by Susan Easton Black, and you've got Mormon Enigma, Emma Hale Smith by Linda King Newell and Verlene Tippett Avery. So if you've not read any of those, I would recommend all of these books to you. They're very good history books on the church, how it started, Joseph Smith, his wife Emma, and what happened to her. A remarkably resilient character, given all of the circumstances that she found herself in. And this is just a quick recap of the timeline of part 1. If you didn't see part 1 video, I would encourage you to go back to the YouTube channel, Church History Insights and Questions, and look at part 1. But this is a very brief recap. So she was born 10th of July 1804, married 18th of January 1827. On the night of September 22nd, 1827, she went with Joseph to the Hill Cumorah for the plates. She wrote some of the Book of Mormon while Joseph dictated the first part of the plates, and she did that while she was pregnant. She wasn't thought to be present on April the 6th, 1830, when the church was officially organized in Fayette, New York. She was, however, baptized in June of 1830, a little bit later, by Oliver Cowdery. She's mentioned in section 25 of the Doctrine and Covenants, and she's commissioned there to compile a hymn book. That was later in 1830. And in August 1830, she was confirmed a member of the church to receive the gift of the Holy Ghost. And then sadly in 1830, also in 1830, August 1830, the end of August, she bade farewell to her parents for the last time. She would never see Harmony, her lovely home in the valley by the Susquehanna River. or her mother and father again. So that was all covered in part one. In this part two episode, we're going to see, well, what happened after leaving Harmony. And as we've just mentioned, because of renewed opposition in Harmony, Pennsylvania, where Joseph and his wife Emma had returned after the church was organized, they moved again to the Whitmer home in Fayette, living there from August 1830 to January 1831. So the picture on the bottom right is a picture of Isaac and Elizabeth Hale family home in Harmony. That's where Emma was raised and lived until she was 26 years old and left in 1830. And the picture at the top is the home in Fayette, the David Whitmer home, where she and her husband moved to. Now, in February of 1831, so a few months later, the following year, Joseph jumps from the sleigh he was riding in, strides into the store full of confidence, and is able to identify Newell K. Whitney by sight, and apparently leads with the quote, "Newell K. Whitney, thou art the man, you have prayed me here. Now, what do you want of me?" Close quote. The arrival of Joseph and Emma Smith in Kirtland was an answer to the Whitneys' prayers, and the Whitneys were immediately supportive of the Smiths. They invited Joseph and Emma to live with them until they could get more permanently settled in the area. The picture at the top there is taken around about 1905, so obviously, much later, but is a sort of picture of the Newell K. Whitney store, which was also the post office in Kirtland at the time. In the summer of 1832, Emma and Joseph were living in 3 storage rooms above Newell K. Whitney's store. And this arrangement left space enough for Emma to take in boarders and, except for infrequent intervals, she would earn money in this way for the remaining 47 years of her life. The gentleman on the left is allegedly a picture of Newell K. Whitney. And just to go back a little bit and cover off the children, Emma had 11 children with Joseph Smith, 5 of whom lived into adulthood. Alvin Smith, he was born and died on June the 15th, 1828, in Harmony, Pennsylvania. Thaddeus and Louisa Smith, twins, born and died on April the 30th, 1831, in Kirtland, Ohio. Joseph and Julia Murdoch Smith, now these were the adopted twins. Joseph died at 11 months old, the 28th of March, 1832. That was a pretty famous story of when a mob attacked them in their home in Kirtland and dragged Joseph and Sidney Rigdon out onto the frozen ground. And it is thought that young Joseph caught a cold because it was very, very cold that night, and he didn't ever recover from that. And I think he apparently died about 4 months later. Joseph Smith III November 6th, 1832 to December 10th, 1914. We'll come on to Joseph Smith III later because he features heavily in later life. Frederick Granger William Smith, June 20th, 1836 to April 1862. Alexander Hale Smith, June 2nd, 1838 to 1909. Don Carlos Smith, June 13th, 1840, died August 15th, 1841. And an unnamed son who was still born February the 6th, 1842 in Nauvoo, Illinois. And finally, David Hiram Smith, born November 1844, so that was some months after his father had been murdered, and he died in August 1904. Now we jump to 1834. This is Zion's camp. You'll probably remember from your church history that the saints under Joseph Smith's prophetic direction had assembled in Missouri. That was to be the New Jerusalem, that was to be Zion. But things did not go well there, and the settled population around them became very concerned about the growth and the influx of these rather strange Mormon people, strange from their perspective. And there was a lot of fighting and a lot of persecution and a lot of intolerance, probably on both sides. And Joseph then set out from Kirtland with about, what was the figure? I think it's probably about 200 people, mostly men, but there were also some women and some children with them. And this was the Zion's Camp March. And the intention was that they would march the 800 miles from Kirtland down to Independence, Missouri, and they would bring about a recovery, and they would put an end to the wars that were going on between the members of the church there and the local population. As it turned out, they did arrive there, but then Joseph subsequently decided that there would be no conflict and that they had achieved their objectives and that they would then return. So during Joseph's absence on the Zion's Camp March, what little news reached Emma in Kirtland was erroneous and slow in arriving. On July the 12th, 1834, the Chardon Spectator, a local newspaper, announced that Joe Smith had been wounded in the leg, which had been amputated, but he had died 3 days after the operation. Until word filtered back, or until Joseph arrived back in Kirtland 2 weeks later, Emma may have believed him dead. And so this is an example of the challenges and difficulties that Emma had to put up with as she was raising her family and living on her own while her husband was on this march, and then to face the prospect that he had in fact been killed. As it turned out, the newspaper report was incorrect. But did she believe at one point that he had died on Zion's camp? Now we move a little bit further forward to 1836, 1835, 36, the building of the Kirtland Temple. And during the building of the temple, many of the workers boarded at Emma's rooms, and all of the beds were taken by these boarders. And the quote comes here from Lucy Mack Smith: "Those who were accommodated by our privations did not know how we fared, for Emma nor I, never either of us, suffered them to know that we took such unwearied pains for them. And the pains she's referring to is that there were no beds left for Emma, Joseph, and Lucy Mack Smith, and they slept on the floor, as did Joseph Smith Sr. Emma conducted the tours of the mummies. When church members in Kirtland purchased 4 mummies and rolls of papyrus covered in hieroglyphics from Michael Chandler in July 1835, the mummies ended up on display in Emma's home for a period, drawing a steady stream of visitors. Emma conducted tours explaining the characters on them as she had heard Joseph do. It's another story to get into the translation of the characters into what has become the Pearl of Great Price Book of Abraham, and of course the much controversy over that in terms of its historical accuracy. Emma told the women not to complain. When the women who had worked to weave the veils that were hung in the Kirtland Temple, when they were not invited into the evening service on the day of the dedication of the Kirtland Temple, 1836, when 416 men were instructed by Joseph in the ordinance of the washing of feet, they were not pleased. Emma tried to explain that there were many privileges not accorded to women and that they must not complain. And now we move forward another couple of years. This takes place in the Liberty Jail in Richmond, Clay County, which Joseph and others are incarcerated. And they're in there for 4 to 5 months over the winter of 38 and into 39. 5 days before Christmas, on December the 20th, 1838, Emma spent 2 days in Richmond Jail, 25 miles to the west of Richmond, Clay County, confined with Joseph. Bible translation papers under her skirt. The Book of Mormon was not the only holy writ that Emma protected. She also secured the manuscript of Joseph's inspired Bible translation. The Smiths moved to Missouri in 1838, intending to publish the revisions, but trouble mounted and Joseph was imprisoned. A friend, Anne Scott, sewed 2 cotton bags attached to a waistband to hide the papers under her skirt. Emma carried her 2 infants with 2 other young children clinging to her skirts, loaded with precious papers underneath, as they walked across the frozen Mississippi River to safety in Illinois. So that is the end of part 2. That brings us to the point where they have lived in Harmony in Pennsylvania for a bit, in Fayette, New York for a bit, in Kirtland, Ohio for a bit, and in Missouri. And now they're going to be in the process of leaving Missouri, and they're going to end up in Illinois and eventually in Nauvoo. So we'll look at that in part 3, which is coming soon. So watch out for part 3. If you haven't already looked at part 1, go back to the Church History Insights and Questions YouTube channel and pick up on part 1. And if you haven't already subscribed or liked or shared, please do so. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.